Wowee. Welcome, everybody. We are live at Turbonomic Labs. This is a Tuesday. So you're watching Turbonomic Tuesday. My name is Eric Wright. I'm your host for the show today. I'm excited. I'm officially, I don't care if people know I have glasses years old. I look like an extra off the JFK set. But today we're going to explore zero downtime automation and how to do right sizing. As you may know, for folks that are familiar with the way that our Turbonomic Labs live events work, every Tuesday we call it Turbo Tuesdays, where we explore specific kind of use cases if you're using Turbonomic and how we can help you. We've got a lot of great stuff we've already done. We get a lot of requests from folks. If, of course, you're watching the live show right now, you can tap in on your comment section wherever you are, whether it's on YouTube, whether on Periscope, or on LinkedIn Live. So just reply back and actually see the comments running live on my screen as well if you want to interact. And of course, you can always stay connected. If you want to connect with me on Twitter, it's at Disco Posse, or just drop me a line on LinkedIn as well. Do a search for Eric Wright Disco Posse. Believe me, there's only one. So the focus of today is really how do we make sure we do zero downtime, non-disruptive scaling. And this is one of the most often requested things to show because inside Turbonomic, it just works. And people want to know how to make sure they're doing it right so you can actually choose the scope and scale with which you decide to initiate your first right sizing, or as we call it. So we're going to go through a couple of different really quick exercises to show you specifically in the Turbonomic UI how to do this. And it kind of goes in the flow of section one, which is we're going to create a group. The first thing you want to be able to do is identify what machines or hosts or what's the application scope that you're setting for your environment, because you want to make sure that you're deploying automation in the context and in your comfort. So by using this, we maintain complete application availability. You ensure that it only applies to particular things. Decisions will continue inside Turbonomic. However, by using grouping, it means that you can start to look in your own UI precisely how you operate in vCenter or in AHV or in your System Center virtual machine manager, whatever it's going to be, wherever your platform of choice is. We're going to talk about vSphere. And I don't even need to show you vCenter as a UI today because you kind of already know the familiarity there. We'll talk about how it interconnects. So step one is going to be creating your group. Once we create our group, then from there, we're going to jump in and we're going to set up a policy. So it's just the real quick for folks that are brand new. Of course, what you're seeing right now is Turbonomic with our application-centric UI is what you're seeing here. If you're a recent deployer of Turbo, you may be seeing this, and it's part of some really, really exciting stuff that's actually coming up. So make sure you stay tuned for a lot of really cool news that's dropping in the next very short while. If you're watching us on replay, of course, this may be rewind. So you may have already seen a lot of what's going on. Now, what I've got here is we're seeing a pretty decent sized environment. This is actually touching my entire lab. So I'm seeing from applications down through all the way down to, I've got converged infrastructure. I've got stuff out on the cloud. I've got lots of different storage backends. It's a moderate sized lab environment. So what I've done is I've set up a specific vCenter cluster. Hey, shout out to Tom. All right. Hey, how's it going? Good to see. I like to see old friends on here. So thank you for jumping on, Tom. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hone in here. Now, if you go, one of my favorite things, I just realized I'm like, I gotta move my screen a bit because it actually, the funny thing is the Turbonomic Labs background is right over top of that. How weird is that? I never thought about that when I was doing pre-production. Okay, let's just zoom this in there. There we go. Okay, there we go. Now we're seeing. So what you're seeing is the search UI is one of the most fantastic features that you're going to be able to use, because if you haven't already set up groups or designed your kind of Turbonomic view, this allows you to go in and just quickly dig in. So I'm going to say, look for clusters, In this case, I see a few different clusters that are active. The health is also identified in the little marker on the left-hand side. So in this case, let's jump in, and I've got VC04, DC01. You will name them however you wish. So this is vCenter 04 in data center 01. You can sense where the pattern's going. So I've got 3 hosts in this particular cluster. It's actually backed. In this case, we've got a vSAN data store. These are actually running vSphere 7. So shout out to all my good friends at VMware and all the vExperts in the world there. So hashtag vExpert. So this is run the latest and greatest version of the operating system. So I've got the hypervisor rather. So what I've got, if I take a look and I hone in, I can see I've got some virtual machines which are identifying some risk and some issues, and potentially whether it's performance. So we've got a variety of things. So at the top here, we can see we've got performance. We need to actually scale up some memory. We need to scale up. We got to do some moving. And we've also got resized down for efficiency because we've over provisioned virtual machines, and they may actually be struggling at the hypervisor layer because we've got other machines that need that memory that are unable to get it because of different issues at the hypervisor tier. This is especially popular in the CPU land because if you've got 4 CPUs, 8 CPUs allocated to a bunch of machines, when you're fighting for queuing, you've got to wait for all the physical CPUs that line up with your layout. Memory, same kind of thing, where the issue with memory, and this is why it's important when you saw that kind of like this chain view, that when I look at my application, I've got some application and it's struggling, then it's sitting on a virtual machine which says it needs more memory. But in fact, that may also be triggering an issue down at the hypervisor layer. And what you'll eventually see is that it's causing swap and ballooning at the hypervisor, which is by design. But then that goes down and you'll see the little storage light up as orange and red, because what happens is that you're actually swapping out to storage and you have a storage contention problem, which under normal cases, like all the regular monitoring tools will say like, hey, just add more memory. But because of the way we see the relationship between all these resources, Turbo's not going to do that. It's going to say, hey, you've actually got a storage controller problem or a storage provisioning problem. So resizing memory may not actually solve your app problem. So anyways, that's my kind of pitch of the understanding of why it matters that we're connecting all of these resources together. So very simply, we've got a bunch of different machines here. So we've got some that are running. We've got front ends. Probably we've got a cluster. We've got some kind of a SQL backend that's here. So we've got SQL production, SQL backups. If I actually just do a list of all virtual machines, you can see them all. So we've got some MariaDB. We've got probably these are CentOS machines. We've got some database servers, again, more MariaDB. So these are actually stored in order of risk. You can see red at the top, yellow in the middle, green at the bottom, and of course, like descending level of resource utilization. And if I were to drill in on any of them, let's say this front end 04, we can actually see a whole lot of information, which shows you exactly what's going on across all the resources that are presented inside Turbo. So you can see the different levels. And if you actually drill in and click on that particular machine, it immediately changes the context. So now what you're seeing is just that particular machine. And I can drill in, first of all, sorry, I'll go back for a second. You're seeing, basic information about it. It's CentOS 7. It's sitting on-prem. It's an active machine. We can take a look kind of historically over the course of time. We've got no executed actions because we have no automation turned on and we haven't manually taken any actions. You can take a look across all these resources and you can actually, just do this. You can actually change the view across, let's say, 7 days. And we'll see it's a fairly steady state machine, which is a rarity, in fact, in most cases, most production environments. Then if you click on the details view, what we're seeing now is this idea of percentile and average utilization. This is super cool because by understanding this is the way that we're making decisions inside Turbonomic, what we're looking at as the daily average, and this is actual consumed by the guest and by the processes, not what vCenter thinks is being used. So it's not allocation, it's consumption. And then we're using percentile as far as the kind of aggressiveness with which we want to make changes. And you can set the observation period, but just out of the box, everything just kind of works. So what we're looking at is we can see the daily average, and also what's the percentile that you want. And if you were kind of run at 95th percentile, which is kind of the most optimal, especially cloud environments run naturally that way. That's kind of the sort of the de facto standard. You can set it as 90th percentile, 95th, 99th. You can go really high and say you want to run this extremely hot. So what you're going to see is all the different scales in here are showing average utilization as well as percentile utilization. Gives you a sense of where you measure. We're seeing virtual memory, the CPU utilization, storage utilization, generally fairly flat, because this is actually just literal consumption. So unless it's rising and falling storage, and you're going to see again like all the different stats that you can drill in on, different sort of variations that are going on CPU. This is, there you go, easy way to tell. This is a single CPU machine. So there's only queuing for single CPU, which is a little bit more hypervisor friendly, not necessarily app friendly. So what I've got in this particular machine is I've actually got a resize up. This is a memory resize, so I can actually take it right now. And you could do that by going through to this action, and you could check here and say apply selected. I'm going to very carefully get off there because I don't want to do that. I actually want to go through the process. So here we go. Step one. This is where we write this down. One, group. I don't have a whiteboard, so there you go. Step one, create our group. So step one, we're going to create our group. I feel like a little mini Karl Rove there. So I'm going to go into settings. I'm going to go to groups. I'm going to say new group. In this case, I'm going to say virtual machine. If you watch, we actually had advanced group creation. It's not really advanced. It's actually super easy. So I'm going to say my front end servers in, what was it? I don't even remember my own lab name. DC0, VC04. So it's the vCenter 04, DC01, something like that. So I'm going to say where the name equals front. Let's just quickly just do this, right? So, alrighty. So I've actually got, if I just say name equals front end, then I could do this. However, I want to be a little bit more granular, because if I just say only by name, what if someone creates a front end server on a different cluster? So we'll actually go and what we can do is we'll say cluster name. And we're going to say it was C01, I think. Look at that. Okay, so now I'm using two measurement criteria to make sure that I'm focusing on, this is a dynamic group. You could also create a static group, which is not ideal because then you have to manage that from that point forward. So let's make sure that we're using dynamic where possible. So I'm going to create this. So any server that's with the name front in it, and in this particular cluster, is going to show up in this group. So if I added another front-end server, let's say this is a scale-out application, then it's going to automatically show up in there. Now I can go through, I'm going to say front-end servers, look at that. So same thing, I can drill in, I see all the machines there. You can easily go in and modify. Alrighty, so that's step one. Step one completed. Now we move on. See, this is my poor person's whiteboard. Alrighty, step two. There we go. It's hard to write. It's hard to write. I like to write like a weatherman. Policy. I write like a 2-year-old. So there you go. Step two, policy. One would think I would have a PowerPoint presentation to do this, but this is Turbonomic Labs. We like to do this thing a little bit more fun. So we go into settings and we go into policies. There are two kinds of policies that you're going to have inside Turbonomic. If you don't already know, there's placement policies and there are automation policies. So you can say new placement, new automation. Now this is we're going to do right sizing. The whole thing is zero downtime scaling. So I'm going to say it's a virtual machine policy. That's the context. That's the scope that I'm going to apply to it. So I want virtual machines. We're going to call this auto scale up front end servers in VC04, VC01. We choose our group. Remember, we just type this in, and if you didn't have a group already, you could actually just create a new group right here. So we're going to say front end servers. We select that. Schedule. So now here's an opportunity. If you wanted to set a schedule, you could do so. But this is a zero downtime scaling. So why would I want a schedule to wait until like tonight to do it? The problem's happening right now. Right now. Okay. Action orchestration. So now this is also very cool. If you're brand new to Turbo, this is actually a bit of a this is the first time you've seen this. If you're existing Turbo customer, you're also seeing some neat new stuff for the first time. So stay tuned for next week. We got some really, really cool news. So make sure you watch next Tuesday. Okay, so what we're seeing, we're going to say vCPU, because we're going to go CPU and memory. So vCPU resize up. We're going to say go above max. So it allows you to kind of go further than what we've said as like max growth period. There's other constraints you can set. I won't go nerd out too hard on those ones right now. vMemory resize up. And we want to also say to be able to resize above max. I want to make sure that these machines have the resources they need. Now, they will only cyclically go up. So we will only go up in increments that have been predefined. In this case, I'm never going to grow. It's not like I'm going to go from 1 gigabyte to like 89 gigabytes. You're actually going to go in increments, which are already set out of the box. So what I'm going to do now, generate actions. Of course, I'm going to say this is generate actions. Now we're not plugged into ServiceNow or anything crazy, so we're just going to go with that. So I'm going to say submit. I have no execution schedule. So we're going to say resize up. And in fact, let me just edit one. We're going to add one more thing here. Make sure that we get everything. Reconfigure. Yeah. Just in case. Okay. Any constraints? Okay, so this is where we want to say, do you need to configure additional constraints? So I'll zoom in a bit. You have the option to enforce non-disruptive mode. Sounds like a good thing to set for zero downtime. So we're going to say non-disruptive mode. Click. So this means that this policy will only apply if there is a non-disruptive change. Fantastic. Let's take a look at the other ones while we're there. You can say use hypervisor vMemory for resize. Turbo discovers the actual consumed memory, so especially if you're gathering guest metrics. And you can also set for shared nothing migration. Let's just say you were doing a migration and there wasn't shared storage. We will allow it to do the shared nothing migration, which is capable in hypervisors today. Operational constraints. You can add a constraint if you so desire. We'll just quickly, you can set scaling target. You can set the max threshold cores, megabytes. So remember I talked about a size above max. I'm not going to set any constraints on this one. And then scaling constraints. So you can set the increment constant. So we could set our memory, say go up by, say I'm a real stickler about binary and I want to only go up by 512 megabytes at a time, or 1 gigabyte, or 1024 megabytes if you really want to be hard-nosed about it. So you can set those increments so it won't do like large scale jumps. By default, it's already set to do so. We set the aggressiveness. Again, this would be like the percentile utilization. Consistent resizing, also a fantastic new thing that allows you to say that if you've got 4 machines that are part of a protected set or an application group, we can call them consistent resizing, so they'll scale together. This is especially if you're using business continuity and you want to scale your target machines just like your source machines. It's more appropriate for scale out application groups, which we see in the cloud. Okay, so let's zoom back out here. So we've set What's our group, right? We've set the group. We've set that there's no schedule, run anytime. Action automation, we're going to say size up, vCPU, and memory. Go for it. Non-disruptive, thank you. Make sure that you don't want to turn that on. We've got no other operational constraints, so we're going to say save and apply. Oh, always happens. Oops. Invalid same policy. See, this is what happens when you do things live. Oh, because I had something set manually. This is the fun part of our brand new policy framework. Oops. Okay. Schedule. There we go. Sorry, my mistake. I had reconfigured turned on. And I don't need that for this particular scale because this is that's for a separate challenge. So I've got my scale up turned on. Now this is the fun part. We just got a few minutes to go. We're going to see if we can actually catch this in the act. But remember, when in doubt, let's go find out what's happening. So you can search if you wanted to go through. We wanted to search for virtual machines. We could go in and we could search for front. So it's going to find all my front end boxes. So there's 3 of them there. The other option you have is you could go by clusters. You could just do a quick jump into the cluster. You could actually do data centers if you so desire. We're going to show all the different data centers. So there's lots of different ways that you can use that search capability to drill in and see what's going on. So we go up to our virtual machine. Now, this is the thing that you're going to see here. If I go through, okay, so I've got no executed actions at the moment. Let's go back across 30 days, see if there's been any more. Oh, look at that. We've got some stuff that's actually happened in the past. So what we actually had was you set your threshold of your executed actions. In this case, I'll set it as a 30-day warning. Now, every action and change that happens inside Turbo is logged inside Turbo as an audit log. You can actually capture this and export it out. You can also use a pre and post trigger for if you want to notify by Slack or some kind of chat ops if you're using Yammer or such. What's the other ones? Gitter, a few different ones like that. Goodness gracious. Maybe Skype, if you love Skype. Not many people love Skype. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log this here. But here's the cool thing. We're actually doing all of the same logging over inside vCenter. So you're actually making sure that you're seeing everything. This is literally just orchestrating the change and making sure that the change is happening inside vCenter. So now what's going to happen is that we're going to see that as we go through the next discovery cycle, we make sure to not aggressively just like pound out changes. We have our real-time discovery uses an asynchronous kind of a TTL style discovery. So every 10 minutes, we gather all of the previous 10 minutes instrumentation in order to make decisions. That goes into the analytics engine. And then once we are able to gather that information, then what we're doing is all these machines, so these applications, these virtual machines, these containers, whatever it's going to be, are then shopping downward for resources that can satisfy their demand. So what we're going to end up seeing is, they will, through the course of shopping for those resources, go to Turbo. Turbo will say, yes, you need more memory. So happens that we are able, so we will present the action. If you drill in on these actions, you will see the action here. So we're going to say a resize up. So we take a look. We show you what was going on over the course of time. We show you why you should make this action, what the results will be from taking that action. And then, like I said at the start, you have the option to actually trigger that manually. If you see some stuff grayed out, it's not in this case in this cluster, we can also have it as recommend only, which is, for folks that are just getting started. But now what you're going to have is through this, now as we go through the next discovery cycle, there will be a wait period. We want to make sure there's a cooling period so we're not just rapidly making changes. And people ask this often, what if will it just like size up, size up, size up? Well, we've got cooling periods, so we will be careful. And you can also set that max threshold. There's a couple of other settings that you can make sure you're configuring. But you literally have done everything you need to do right now, which is create your group to identify where you want to apply policy. And if we look at the policies in here, what we see is in this virtual machine context, there are two policies in place. One is the auto scale up front end servers. And obviously we know that well. You can actually click it here and you can actually view exactly what's going on inside the policy. And then we've got our resize. In this case here, we've got our machines that are named PH0. These are, okay, they're in the Philippines, so appropriately named. And those ones, this is for maybe somebody that's in APAC, they're using it. So we can operate on different schedules. And we're saying to size up, size down. So we're actually allowing complete scaling actions. And again, we've set no constraints in these particular ones. So what you'll see is when you look as well at the orchestration, we're using native orchestration. We haven't plugged into ServiceNow. Are there any constraints? So right now, the default target for memory is 90% for the utilization. So that's that kind of percentile mechanism. Network throughput. So you can see all of the targets. And if you created custom thresholds or custom triggers, different custom metrics by which you want to measure and take actions, they'll show up here. And in fact, if you want to drill in, let's go through. We pick our list of virtual machines. Let's grab a front end server. If I go to the front end server, I can also look at the policies. And I see that this one has a policy applied to it. You know, what are the different ways in which it's going to interact with them? And ultimately, again, making sure that all of these values that you can see, and if you go to your core configuration inside Turbo, you can set these across as global configurations or in just for the specific ones. Now, because I don't want to make you sit here and listen to me for another 10 minutes, let's take a look. We'll go into the kind of Martha Stewart pre-baked oven here. Let's go back down to the data center. And then we're going to see the different resources that are there. So the cool thing is you can drill around the different views, again, depending on how you want to view the context is. I've got a virtual data center. I've got a physical data center. We've got 3 hosts that are in there. I grab my machines. So you can go through all of these different actions. So remember, we said that we had some actions that were already there. And when I looked down, so what will happen in about 10 minutes, but I'm not a kind of person that likes to wait, you will see exactly this. And so what it's going to end up showing is that just like this one, so here's a machine that was configured. So we've got a move. So this is this one here was accepted manually. So SE demo Eric W. That's old Disco Posse here. So that's me. I've actually manually taken an action. And here we show one that was automatically accepted by the system. So this is the core engine is taking the action. And that was done. You know, in this case, we saw what the policy was for what that wanted to look like. So we've set performance assurance. This is the reason it did it. And it will actually take the change. And because it's a non-disruptive change to add virtual memory, we've got hot add enabled back on the virtual machine. You can even do hot add for CPU. So any action you can take that falls under non-disruptive will be able to be done. That's it. I should say, here's the classic thing, you know, step 1, group, step 2, policy, step 3, here's the old meme, step 3, profit. All right, there you go. So enjoy. This is non-disruptive automation. And if you wanted to hang tight, I'll even fire up on my Twitter probably shortly that we actually will finish the change here. So rather than wait for the market cycle. And again, the reason why we do this is making sure that we are conservative and appropriate with when actions are taken, making sure that as part of assuring performance, doing it as efficiently as possible while maintaining your core business and IT policies. Application availability is the number one core policy I would say that most of us have. So this is making sure that we are doing the changes that we do, maintaining continuous availability, and that's it. It is that easy. And then from there, the very same way in which we've just configured this particular scope, you can go a little further and I can add more machines to that policy. I could add different windows. I could set a change down. Our upcoming episode, what we're going to have do, we'll share some more about doing that scale down. And what does that look like for setting policy timing and such? And I'll actually explore more. You got a little bit of a taste of a new look and feel. So stay tuned for next week. And please do join us for the live show next Tuesday. It's a very special Turbonomic Labs Turbo Tuesday. So I hope to see you there. Thank you all for watching today. My name is Eric Wright. You can catch us again every Tuesday and every Thursday. Join me this Thursday where I'm going to unpack EKS versus Fargate. It's an AWS. It is a managed Kubernetes throwdown showdown. So hopefully you join us and we'll see you there. Thanks very much from all the folks here at Turbonomic and Turbonomic Labs. It's a pleasure to share some time with you today.